And my uncle talked to Stephanie. He told him, there's a child here who would love to meet you, and could he play a little song for you in the dressing room? So I went in. He said, yes, of course. I walked into the dressing room and I had my guitar with me. He said, well, play you something. I played him. I guess he was probably thinking that I would play something. I don't know, but I think I played. Well, I don't remember the tune, but I can barely remember. But I think it was probably something that he must have liked, and all of a sudden there was the second part of the concert, and he walks up to me, takes my hand, and said, "Come with me on stage," and we ended the second part of the show together.
Today, Planet Guitar is thrilled to talk with Bire Lagre. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
How are things in Northeast France today?
Pretty good. Sunshine, life is good, and so far.
I believe you grew up in the very same region. What do you love about it?
Oh, I think, it's actually just a matter of habit. Usually, where you grew up is this, it's where you stay most of the time. And I didn't need to move so far. So I just decided to stay, around my area here.
I was looking at some photos, very beautiful region, and lots of interesting things like pottery, tradition, and culinary.
Yeah, it's amazing. Absolutely, yeah.
Going back to your roots, I was wondering if you could tell us something about your grandparents and your parents.
Well, from the side of my father, most of them were musicians. And I remember my father himself grew up in a musical family. His father was a violin player, and the whole, his brothers as well, and so my father was as well a guitar player, and it was kind of a very, I wouldn't say common, but it was like more or less in the gene, of becoming, I guess, a musician because of my, all my people who were musicians before.
I couldn't help thinking about when I read about your history that you come from a Sinti gypsy family, and of course during the Nazi period, I guess your grandparents and parents must have been affected by that.
I think, from as far as I can remember, not my parents directly, but their family was, there were people who got caught and they put them in the concentration camps. But it's a historical, of course. It's just as much as Jewish people. The gypsy people got very, very much persecuted, and both sides of my family were had to suffer through that.
Were some of them killed in the extermination camps?
Not that I can remember. I really hope not.
Were they forced to move around Central Europe at that time?
I think my mother was forced to move a lot around because they were in France. There was this they called that at that time the free zone, actually, where none of that stuff, that ugly stuff, happened. So I remember that my mother told me that she spent most of her time in that free zone, they called it, which was like, I can't remember. I think it was down somewhere near. I wouldn't, I don't want to say any mistakes, but it was way much down, south.
I see. You mentioned your father played guitar, and I believe your mother played violin.
She played a little violin, yeah.
Yeah. Would you mind describing the ambience you grew up in?
Well, it was a beautiful ambience because we children, my brother and my two sisters, we were pretty much free, and we didn't have how could I say? not severe, but you know, we didn't have parents who were like telling us, you know, what to do. Of course, they were there, they were assisting us, but you know, most of the time, the whole thing was, you know, around music.
I read online that you grew up in a gypsy camp, and I've got this kind of perhaps fantasy in my head of caravans and bonfires and musicians. Was that something? Was it something like that?
It was pretty much similar as you described it, you know, very much similar. Yeah, you know, we had like, you know, there was a fire camp, you know, most of the time in the evening, and you know, me and my brother we would come along. We would play guitar. You know, my you know, mother, she would cook, or you know, my father would grill, you know, some meat and stuff. So I pretty much cowboyish actually in that kind of
Uh-huh.
tradition, you know.
Uh-huh. And I believe because of your particular music talent, which started at the age of 4 or 5, uh, there were many people coming around from the community as well, including the mayor, I believe, calling by to listen to you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And also at school, you know, most of the time, the teachers would ask me to bring my guitar along, and yeah, so the mayor came over, and you know, stuff like that. So we were very lucky.
Were you supported by your school in your musical interests?
Um, well, one thing that was great is that the director of that school, he would let me go and play in concerts, because at that time, while I was going to school, I was starting to, you know, to do concerts already. So at that time, you know, every time I had to go do a concert, I had to see the director. I mean, in that case, my parents. And so, you know, we had like I had to get some kind of a authorizations to go and play the concert in case I wouldn't, if I wasn't available to go to school on that day.
What?
That's about all. But you know, they were very kind to me.
And I understand you grew up fluent in various languages. I've thought about French, obviously English, Sinti Manouche, maybe German.
Perfectly German, yes. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. A bit of Italian, you know, stuff like that. But I think this comes from I've been traveling, you know, like most of the musicians do, you know, after a certain while when you've been to so many countries, you pick up every time, you know, a little word here, there, and you start to make yourself understandable, you know, wherever you go.
E
It's
e
like a, you know, it's like a very common thing, you know, among musicians to speak several different languages, you know, at least, you know, a minimum to make ourselves understand when we go, you know, to a restaurant or buy something, you know, whatsoever in Japan or wherever.
Amazing. Y si te hablo en español, ¿me entiendes?
Sí, un poquito. Sí.
What a great range. And is it fair to say that beyond your very impressive language skills, music is more important means of communication for you?
Oh, I think first of all, you know, because I've started playing guitar at such a very young age that it I'm wondering if not, you know, if it's not my first language actually. You know, I think I played guitar before I could ever speak. You know, I was able to play already. So it's a great way of communicate. You know, when you play an instrument, and many things are so much easier. You don't need to speak a lot. You know, trying to explain different things. Sometimes, you know, when I get bored or I'm kind of not angry, but I don't know. I'm like, you know, sometimes I go out, I take a walk, or most of the time I pick up my instrument, you know, and I try to forget. Could be piano or bass or guitar, you know. Just, you know, that's why I feel very confident when anything could happen. You know, I turn over to the guitar, and 10 minutes after, you know, the stress is gone.
Do you remember your first guitar, the make?
Yes, I do believe so. My real, well, I think it must have been my father went out to a music store and bought me a little guitar. Now I could not remember what it was, but I can still picture it. It was a uh, small little instrument, which I've played quite a while.
What happened to it?
Oh, great question. I wish I knew. I don't have it. It would have been a great thing to have something like that, in my guitar collection, but probably got lost or whatever.
What was your first proper guitar?
Oh, my first proper guitar was not until I think 1978, I think. I finally got, my father again went out and bought me one of those typical Django Reinhardt Selmer kind of, model. And in those days, there was a great luthier in Paris. His name was Jacques Fabineau. And he made those Django guitar, type kind of. He was very close, and they were great sounding guitars. So luckily, I was able to get one through my father. He bought me one, and then he came home with. I was in paradise, and I said to myself, "Wow, finally, the guitar of my dreams." Looking at the pictures of Django and stuff, and we were not able. I was not able to get a guitar like that around here. So they had one. My father told me years later that he saw one by accident in one of the stores here, and so he went out and bought it right away. So I had the guitar I played. Actually, I recorded my first record with that guitar.
Oh, wow.
I had it quite a few years.
We'll come on to that in a second. I know that you also play violin, upright bass, electric bass, drums, piano, and I think I even saw a video of you singing.
Oh, that was a try. that was a terrible try, actually.
It looked great to me.
Well, it's listening to Sinatra all my life. I came up with that idea that why not try to record something in that kind of style. So I sang a few songs.
Did you ever attend formal lessons for any of these instruments?
Oh, not really. Not really. I had two guitar teachers. That goes years back. I was maybe 13 or 14. And they came a few times, and I don't know, strange why they never came back, because what they didn't know that I could play. I mean, already up to a certain level at my age at that time. So what they wanted to teach me, I already knew. So it was nothing new for me. And I told them, I said, well, look, guys, how about this? I was starting to play them a few phrases, and I guess, I don't know, they probably said to themselves, well, we don't need to teach this guy, he can play, obviously.
They never asked for lessons from you. Turning to your influences, Billy, your father introduced you to the work of Django Reinhardt at a very early age, and you recorded Roots to Django in 1980. Mm-hmm. As a child, what attracted you most to him?
It's a great question. I still don't know nowadays. It was probably a sound that I have in my very young age that I probably captured. And it probably seemed like, I was going to say almost a normal thing to pick up, to try to play how Django did. But it was, I think also it had to do with a lot of gypsy tradition, because most of the gypsies, they adore Django. There are many guitar players who were trying to copy his style, and I guess I was one of them as well. Because my father was in love with that kind of music, and we always had music at home. So most of the time, we listened. Well, my father also listened to a lot of classical music, among others. But I remember my brother and I, we picked on Django, as much as we could, because we were all excited every time if we could put on a record and play along, play along with those records. So playing that kind of style of music was a normal thing, actually, for me, because I admired Django Reinhardt so much, and still today, of course. So this is probably I picked that kind of music to start with, I would say at first.
How do you feel about that first album now?
I feel good about it, actually. I feel very good about it because I was very lucky in those days to be able to do a record, at such a young age. I must have been 12 or something. And but the funny thing is, I listened to it when it came out, as a child, because I was so excited. Wow, I recorded a record. Here it is. It's out now and stuff. But then I've never listened to it again until nowadays, I think, even, because I'm the kind of guy, and many musicians are like that, we never, most of the time, we never listen to the stuff we recorded. Once it's done,
I believe around that time you met up with Stéphane Grappelli in a concert. You went with your father and your brother, and you met him in his dressing room, and I believe he asked you on stage to play.
Yes, absolutely. That was even before I recorded my first record. It was even before I got introduced in that music scene, And my father and I, my brother, and we went to Strasbourg. He played there with Niels Henning, Ørsted Pedersen, wonderful bass player, who's no longer with us. And I think it was Larry Coryell and Philip Catherine. It was like 1980, 81, I think. And we went up to see him, and I think one of my uncle was with us, and he knew a little bit Stéphane. And I think during the intermission, we went to the dressing room, and my uncle talked to Stéphane. He told him, there's a child here who would love to meet you, and could he play a little song for you in the dressing room? So I went in. He said, yes, of course. I walked into the dressing room, and I had my guitar with me. He said, well, play or something. I played him. I guess he was probably thinking that I would play something, I don't know, But I think I played, well, I don't remember the tune, but I can barely remember. But I think it was probably something that he must have liked. And all of a sudden, there was the second part of the concert. And he walks up to me, takes my hand, and said, come with me on stage. And we ended the second part of the show together.
That was a complete surprise to you.
That was a complete surprise, yeah, because I just thought, he might listen to me and then, bye. But no, he took me with him on stage, and we ended the second part of the concert. I played the whole second part through. So that was so exciting. I got great memories of that. I couldn't say concert, but of that invitation. I'd say.
He was, of course, much older than you. He'd experienced great poverty, and he grew up in an orphanage. Were you able to make a connection with him that was beyond music?
No, I haven't got the chance because we wouldn't see each other very, very often after that. Unfortunately, I ran into him sometimes when we played the same festival, stuff like that. But we never got to talk, anything else than about music.
I see. And then when you were 15, in 1981, you had that large concert in Montreux. How do you recall that moment now?
Oh, I think it was a great experience to play as a solo act at the Montreux Jazz Festival. It was filled with unbelievable great, very famous musicians. And I guess I was not afraid. I was not, I just walked up there and played what I had to play. And it was funny because my brother always tells me that, you had the guts that nobody else could have had, when I was younger.
Uh-huh.
Said you played everywhere. You played with anybody without having 1 inch of a kind of a stress or fear or something. So I was lucky. Unfortunately I don't have that today. Today when I go on stage, I'm frightened.
Is
But
that right?
it's a good it's a good medicine, because I think if you go on stage and you're not nervous or something, it becomes a routine. And I think every professional musician should have that little how shall one say it? That little nervous part, because it shows you that you're a human being, and just not just some routine musician who walks on stage and does his stuff. So, but nowadays I'm pretty much nervous. The first one or second tune is always like a thing, but once I'm past that, everything is fine.
Great. Then in the mid-80s, you toured with Jaco Pastorius and later recorded Stuttgart Aria with him.
Yeah.
It's well known that Jaco had mental health and quite serious drug problems at that time. Was that very apparent to you?
It was sometimes, yeah. Unfortunately, he's such a great musician, of course, and I saw him, unfortunately, sometimes not doing very well,
For
because
example,
of that illness he had also. It was not only drinking and stuff, but he had some illness, that nobody really wanted. I mean, I don't know what it was, but sometimes he would, he had that thing that which was uncontrollable, actually. And that stuff probably came by drinking, taking so many drugs throughout all those years, But I saw him a few times, yeah, where where I had a hard time, actually, because I was 19 or 20 at that time, and it was not really the fact seeing him in that kind of unfortunately in that kind of behavior. I felt so bad for him, Other people would have said, well, look at this guy, he's drunk, he's on drugs, he goes crazy. I didn't feel that way. I had a very, very, how shall I say, I had trouble seeing that, I was not afraid or something, but I was very sad seeing him in that kind of mood,
you're a very different type of character to him, I believe. How did you deal with that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes, you're a very different type of character in that respect. How did you deal with those moments of difficulty or?
When he was like that, I was trying to take my distance a little bit, because it didn't feel, when I first saw him like that, I said to myself, well, this is the thing that I don't want to end up with, Although I felt very bad for him, but it was for me, it was also a great school to see that someone can do a mistake and maybe take the wrong turn, at the end. And this is unfortunately what happened to Jaco, and it helped me to, not to turn in that kind of stuff, actually, which should be, as we all know, very dangerous. And which is not, it's not a good thing.
On a happier note, I believe you had quite a warm relationship with him, and he gave you guitar lessons bass guitar lessons in hotel rooms and on your touring bus. Can you remember?
Where do you know all that stuff? You don't know a hell of a homework. It's unbelievable. Wow. Yeah. He was at the same time, he was adorable. He was. And I was starting to play a little bit of bass, in those years, and he showed me a lot of stuff from his first album. How he did that song called "Portrait of Tracy." He showed it to me in his hotel room, and I was like, I couldn't believe my ears and my eyes, because it was an incredible thing to see also, at the same time. This fantastic, technique and everything just was so perfect. And then he taught me a little bit, of course, every once in a while while we were on tour, he would take his bass out and say, "Really, come on, we got a half hour. Let me show you a few things." I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Yes, let's go for it." And I was the happiest guy on earth, when that came up.
I'm sure. He of course, played with Weather Report, who were at that time going through many changes. Were you ever close to joining them?
Yes, I got a call, I think in the mid '80s, from Joseph Zawinul, because there was, after Weather Report broke up, they had for a short period of time, they had a band called Weather Update. And I don't know who suggested me to Joe. I don't, maybe it was even, I don't know if Jaco was still alive at that time. But anyhow, so somebody told me that, whether Joe is looking for a guitar player. So I got Joe's number and I called him up. I said, "Well, Joe, Mr. Zawinul," I said. And so he asked me if I could, do it. But unfortunately, I couldn't do it because I was already signed up with Blue Note at that time. I had my first record out on Blue Note Records. So I felt so bad at the same time, that I couldn't play with one of my heroes, But I couldn't do it because I was, already committed to Blue Note and we had a lot of promotion to do. So I couldn't do it, but I'm glad that I got the offer,
Yeah, lovely.
Sure. Yeah, amazing.
One of your other big influences was George Benson. I was intrigued that you called him your spiritual father. Why was that?
Did I say that?
I have read that. Do you have?
Oh. No, George is an amazing, one of the top 5 guitar players, anyhow, whatever comes. And as a guitar player, if you don't like George's playing, then there's a problem. There's a huge problem. And I love George's guitar playing. I've been knowing him for over 30 years now, and it's just an amazing. He's a big influence. Yeah, absolutely.
You've been associated. Sorry, go on.
No, he's a big influence, but we all have our own stuff, going when we play. But I still, and George is like that as well. He loves other guitar players. He's not the kind of guy who wears things that he doesn't like other guitar players. He loves other guitar players, and he's always up there seeking out new guitar players, and which is great. I think he certainly wouldn't need to, but he loves so much the instrument, and plus he's a great guy, an incredible, great, simple guy.
You've been associated with the Yamaha Pacifica and the Strat and many other guitars. If suddenly there was a fire in your guitar store, which one would you grab and run out with?
None. I would just take the door and run out without the guitar. Probably the easiest way, right? I don't know if if I would have the chance to grab a very expensive old instrument, of course I would have the time to take. I wish, I hope I would have the time to take out, the best instrument which that I have. Now, would it be Yamaha? I don't know, probably not. But I would rather go for the older ones, that I have.
Which one?
Well, I have a 1964 Fender Strat, stuff like that, and then L5. I would, if I could grab those two, the rest could burn.
Some people, of course. Some people say that guitar music is finished because of electronica and rap and everything, but you've said it's just beginning. What makes you believe that?
I mean, if I take a look at to all those great guitar players who are, it's amazing they become younger and younger, and they play better and better. I mean, these young kids, they got such an incredible technique, and the way I look, they reinvent the guitar again. Any kind of style of music. I mean, the rock guys, the jazz guitar players. It's something is still so new and fresh that, and at the same time, it's such a great sign because if you think, the guitar is not that old, that it's maybe the instrument itself, is a little bit, over 100 years old. So imagine, look at instruments like violins, which have been around for 500 years. So that's why I'm kind of still say we are still at the beginning at this instrument, and I think that's why also we have such great guitar players who are still following up with, yeah.
You've played guitar across so many genres and played with an incredible array of top artists, but said it's very important to keep challenging yourself. What challenges do you have left?
Oh, I hope as many as I can, because music is something in general that it needs to be shared, as we all know. Because if I would sit in my living room or in my music room and not sharing it, or I think it would be a sad thing. So I hope that I can still discover a lot because I still want to learn. I hate. I don't know who it is, but there are probably some musicians who say, "Well, I reached a point now, and that would be a very bad idea." So I hope there's no ceiling, and that the music, I can still continue and progress, as every musician hopes to progress. Even though we have heard so many music, we have practiced. I've practiced all my life, even though now in the last 25 years I practice less because it's always in my hand. It comes from touring that much, so I don't really need to practice anymore. Even though now I'm getting older, I'm starting to practice again. Maybe out of fear that I could not play one day anymore. But in a general sense, I love playing. I just love playing, no matter where. I just love playing the instrument.
You released recently the largely instrumental solo suites, but there's one track at the end called "Angel from Montgomery" where you play with your daughter Zoe.
Yes.
Could you tell us how that came about?
That's I asked my daughter because I really wanted to have her on one track on this solo album, and I left her the choice to. She's not especially a jazz singer, not at all. You know, she's into many different stuff. And I just told her, well, look, I mean, you know, I told her, you know me, you know, doesn't need to be jazz, doesn't be this, you know, it doesn't have to be the standard or whatever. Just, you know, come up with something. And I think the next day she sent me a little list of the tunes she would like to sing. And I saw this particular song called, you know, Angels from Montgomery, who I said, I know that tune. And she said yes, because it's funny that I'm asking her because she just saw it on YouTube, sang by Bonnie Raitt. And so, of course, I turned on the TV and, you know, I was looking for that song, you know, sang by Bonnie Raitt. And I said, well, you know what, let's do it. So she and we decided to record that song, probably because of its easiness, you know. I mean, the song doesn't need to have a million notes, you know, every time. So that's why we've chosen. And she felt very comfortable with it as well, you know, since she's not really a jazz singer. She's more into pop and stuff like that. So I said, you know, let's record it. And this is how the idea came, you know, came to light.
I know you're touring now. What plans do you have for the rest of the year?
What I've planned for the rest of the year?
Yeah.
Oh, you know, just touring. I have had. I've just recorded a. Well, it's kind of strange, but it's not really under my name, although it is. It's a record. It's a new CD, but it should be out by September. So it's a tribute from of a French composer who was called Loulou Gastet, and he's. It's too complicated. It's kind of very complicated. It's you know, it's two guitars, upright bass, and it'll be out in September. And in the meantime, you know, I'm just keep, you know, playing concerts and try to keep busy.
That's great. Thank you so much for being open with us and
Oh, my
being
pleasure.
so generous. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you, Grappelli.
Thanks, so did I. Thank you so very much.
All the best.
Thanks to you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.